Hello, and welcome to another episode of Smells Like Identity Hygiene. Actually, it's the last episode of 2025, and for today, I have a very special guest, someone who's been wanting to come on the podcast for a while, but I've been holding him off because this is officially now our last episode of a 2-year run. So next year will be our 3rd year of Smells Like Identity Hygiene. So today's very special guest for this very special episode is Rita Gurevich. She is the founder and CEO of Sphere, the company that employs me. So Rita, welcome.
Thank you. I like being called special. That's fun. Thank you.
Well, you are a special guest. I know I've been putting off including you because I wanted you to be on for a special episode. And of course, for people that don't know you, they could look you up on LinkedIn. They could Google. But if you want to tell us just a little bit about Sphere, about your journey, and about what we do here at Sphere.
I would be honored to do that, especially on this very special podcast of 2025. So, Rosie, you know this story. You can take a nap. But for the folks that don't know a lot about Sphere, I'm very proud to say that we're also concluding our 15th year of Sphere World. So it's an exciting time. I like nice round numbers. But for folks that don't know a lot about the company, we have a really interesting history, which I think actually shows itself so beautifully when people kind of get to know us and see what we're up to and the problems that we're solving. And really a lot of the reason I'm saying that is because 10 out of our 15 years were as a consulting company where we were out there helping companies assess identity, find problems, and fix them. And lo and behold, we saw tons of patterns in how we were approaching these programs. And all of that experience started to make its way into code. And about 4.5 years ago, maybe a couple months more now, we released the first version of Sphere Board, which essentially automated how to find all of your accounts and figure out their entitlements, understand the risks, and clean it up in a way that's a lot more automated than people were used to. And we ended up coining this term called identity hygiene, which is essentially what it sounds like, finding and fixing problems, but also making sure that these environments stay clean over time. And I think we're kind of uniquely positioned to be super advanced in this arena because we've seen it all. We've done this for the largest organizations in the world with our wonderful hands, and we saw exactly what it takes to do this at scale. So 10-year programs can be done elegantly, quickly, and folks can really move on to maintenance mode. So that's what we're really proud of here at Sphere.
Awesome. And given that it is the last episode of the year, I thought maybe what we could do is take a look back, right? So spend a little bit of time looking back at 2025, and then, of course, look forward to 2026. So my first question for you, Rita, is if you had to pick one word to describe identity security in 2025, what would it be and why?
I only get one word.
Well, I mean, you can say, well, the why allows you to expand. So don't just say security. Obviously, we got a long podcast to go through. You definitely want to say more than one word.
Rosie, you know me better than that. You know I can very rarely be contained to one word. Can I do 2?
You could do 2 words.
Okay,
but you have to explain why. So it's more than just the words.
Sure. So my first word is going to be inevitable. How about that?
Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
Inevitable.
And the reason I chose the word inevitable is because I've seen this coming from a mile away, but I think that most folks have now realized, especially in 2025, that identity is no longer a security sub-discipline, right? It's actually the control plane for everything. And I believe 2025 was the year identity stopped being optional and started being unavoidable. And that's pretty exciting for folks like us who have been at this for 15 years, working with companies that were maybe more regulated or wanted to be more proactive. Now we're seeing folks come to our front doors that are saying, oh my gosh, like I have to get a handle on this. So that's why I chose the word inevitable. I didn't know 2025 would be the year that it would be this kind of influx. But I surely appreciate it, especially post 2020, post COVID, when everybody started to be remote and environments became so fragmented that this was going to be a big problem moving forward. And I think our little magic 8 ball was right.
So it's interesting because that you said inevitable, and I always measure how important something is in the technology world by how much press it gets outside the technology world, right? So this year we saw some major identity-related acquisitions that leaked out of kind of our little vacuum, right? Like the Apollo acquisition of CyberArk is all about identity. That's all it's actually about. And it was interesting to see when identity, as you said, it is more than just this little far off corner of the overall cybersecurity. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but does it feel like the common non-technical, non-security people are starting to recognize that identity is what gets attacked? Right, not necessarily firewalls, and I need antivirus. Right, is what the non-technical person might think about when they think about cybersecurity because it's been hammered into their heads. But it feels like people are starting to recognize identity as kind of the attack surface.
100%, and even go down to the broader just human consumer world. Right, there's commercials during the Super Bowl about identity. I always make this joke that my grandma, when I started the company and I started working on these type of projects for customers, she had no idea what I did. She didn't even really understand the concept of cybersecurity. And you kind of fast track to the last handful of years, they understand how important this is. A funny little story, last Super Bowl when that identity commercial came on, I forget which big company broadcast it, but my grandma calls me, she goes, "Rita, you have a competitor." I said, "All right, thanks, Grandma, for watching out for me and for Sphere." But it is true that the world just is starting to understand it. Folks at companies that are so far removed from technology have to do training about identity. There's phishing simulations out in every organization. So I absolutely see that it's a paradigm shift in how people think about this priorly obscure topic. For sure, it's become front and center for many.
It's funny because it's everyone knows what identity is. They've known for years because they log in when they get to work, right? But kind of thinking about it in the context of security is something that it does seem like it's coming up more to the surface. So is there anything in the last year that surprised you in the way that organizations are tackling identity security?
Well, you didn't let me use my second description word.
Definitely. Use the second word first, and then we'll get to the second question.
But actually, it's a nice segue to your question.
I just guessed it. that must have been what happened.
So my second word is humbling.
Okay.
And the reason I chose that word is because it's interesting to me that even mature companies that run mature programs, they realized how much they don't know about identity and access. And I think it surprised them. I think it surprised their broader executive leadership teams, as well as all the way down to the practitioners, because for the first time, they were asked to verify what they know. They were asked to validate and document where they're looking. And I think a lot of companies, when they start peeling back that onion, they're like, oh boy, there's a lot we don't know, right? So I think that was a big surprise for a lot of companies. And it definitely changed the way they approach identity security, in my opinion. They're focusing a lot on the gaps, right? And I think that's a big shift. And it's not just the flashy gaps, it's the things that have been around that they just never were forced to quantify in the past. And I think that's a positive surprise, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the past, the sins of the past, like we like to say here, right? The identity sins of the past. I think, if you think about those legacy systems, the things that have been around for years and years and years, some older than cybersecurity, and it's definitely in its modern form, but you know, some of us are old enough to remember when everyone's password was password, and then to make it a little more complex, you use P at SSWORD, right? But those systems are still around, and a lot of those sins of not enforcing passwords, not enforcing complex passwords, not enforcing password changes, or properly protecting those accounts, those are still out there, right? And for the most part, when you expose those things, I'm surprised that people are surprised. It's like, but you knew this. This is something that's been around for 30 years, and you haven't done anything about it until now. You shouldn't be surprised. This is there. I mean, it's great that they're surprised and they're alarmed. More important than surprise, I guess, it's alarmed, and they feel like, okay, now I have to take action. But these are the things that get attacked, right? These are the systems, those vulnerable systems that get attacked, not the brand new, shiny, built from scratch when cybersecurity and even identity security was a thing. So, yeah, I agree. Like the surprise of people seeing this for the first time. But back to the second question, is there anything that surprised you? Like, for me, it's the surprise of people being surprised, right? Can you think of something that kind of surprised you in the last year, working with all of these customers, talking to people about identity security and identity hygiene and identity in general?
And I would, yeah, absolutely. And using that word surprise that we said a couple of times now, it's also like the surprising honesty about the gaps, right? I think used to people try to do a little CYA, they didn't want to admit on a call with the boss that there may be blind spots, there may be gaps, but now so many people are talking about this, so it's less taboo, and it's good to admit your challenges, because it used to be, oh no, will I check that box and will I look good on paper? Will I get that bonus? But now the impact of not being honest about those gaps are much more significant, right? Nobody wants to be the culprit or the root cause of a breach. So I think it's a scary time, but I think the fact that leadership at many organizations is allowing for that kind of transparency, I think is a step in the right direction. Some of our customers are gigantic. These small teams, they can't possibly be expected to rationalize what's going on in every crevice of their estate. And I think that the C-suite, the boards, they understand that better now. So it's not looked at as somebody did something wrong. It's more about how do we catch up quickly.
Okay. So, we're now like 10 minutes into our conversation, and we've yet to mention AI. And I don't think we can properly get listed on Apple Podcasts unless we mention AI in a podcast these days. But obviously everyone's talking about AI. I'm sure your LinkedIn feed, like mine, is full of AI. We've been to conferences where everyone just keeps talking about AI over and over again. But how do you think AI is really, or how do you think AI really impacted identity security in 2025?
Well, I definitely think that AI is more than hype. Like, I will say that, right? And AI is not going away, that's for darn sure. And not just in identity, but in the world. I mean, how many people do we talk to that say in their respective domains they don't use some form of an AI tool to improve their throughput or productivity or their outcomes to customers or even internally? Like, we all do it, right? And like I said, I don't think it's going away. Do I think it's the number one root cause of all issues of today? No. But it's kind of exciting that companies are being a lot more proactive to these new trends than they ever were before, right? They're almost thinking about preparing for the inevitable, which is actually a really good thing, right? If people didn't think about this today, would they be prepared for tomorrow? Now, that doesn't mean that everything else goes away and that the only area of importance is AI. but not talking about it at all and not thinking about it at all, you won't be prepared. So I think there is real impact. I think people are thinking about it more proactively. I think it's a problem of tomorrow, but who knows how fast tomorrow will come.
Yeah, and it's funny, you and I talked about this. We were at a conference recently, and people came up to us and they felt like it was refreshing that we didn't immediately go to AI or talk about AI, whether it's talking about how we're using AI or how we can protect AI. But it seems like, in that conference, booth after booth after booth, everything was just about AI when, yes, of course, it's an important topic. It's something that we have to keep in mind. It's something that is going to be very, very relevant. And as you said, it's not going away. But there's still some fundamental things that need to be protected beyond just worrying about AI agents that aren't even built yet, right? There's still those core foundational systems. And if you haven't wrapped your head around that, core, basic, foundational systems that have been around for 50 years, how are you even thinking about tackling more complex, ever-evolving, ever-learning systems, right? You need the foundation before you got to crawl before you can run, right? But it feels like everyone immediately wants to get to run because that's the hot topic today.
And if you think about what AI agents are going to be doing, it's essentially an amplified execution of what a human can do. So how can you protect what these AI agents can do if you can't protect even the baseline of what a human can do or what a system can do, right? So absolutely, I think we're all building towards that at 100%. It does get slightly frustrating sometimes when companies use AI in pure headline form and they can't really articulate what it is they're doing and why. And I think that a lot of companies are going to find themselves in painful situations because people are going to start to become attuned to that, right? So it's not going away, but I think we as like a vendor community have to be practical and clear and transparent with the customer community on what it is, what you're doing, and why.
And responsible, right? I always say whenever I talk to whether it's a developer, a product person, even a support person, I always say, it's always good to, if you're going to fail, right? When it comes to security, you're better off failing and telling someone, hey, you're not protected. And then it turns out that when they look, they realize, oh, wait, no, I am protected. This is an exception, whatever it is. Then telling them, all clear, you're good. And then realizing, oh, no, I made a mistake. I missed something, right? Because at least, that tells you don't have to take action. You could just relax. Whereas the other failure tells you got to look, you got to check, you got to fix this, and it calls them into action. And maybe it's a false positive, and of course you don't want to continue to have false positives. But it feels like, as an industry, we're starting to give people that sense that we will be able to protect against these AI agents when we don't, the way to protect them, the way that they're even running is evolving literally day by day, right? And I feel like we need to take a step back and say, okay, we have to see what is going to happen. We're going to see, what's going to happen in the next 6 months. And we have to address those issues as they come along, not just say, I have the end be all solution for everything day one, because you absolutely do not. Right? It's literally changing every day. So you can't possibly say that you have a solution for me that's going to work 6 months from now, 12 months from now, when things are changing so quickly.
And just, one more thought on that. Like, I don't think AI revolutionized identity in 2025, but it definitely exposed how fragile our controls already were, right? And that's pivotal, right? You don't build a house with the roof first. You build it from the ground up, right? And I think that's a core message about what we stand for and who we are at Sphere.
So actually that leads into my next question around traditional IAM, right? I know you and I talk a lot about the limits of traditional IAM. What are some of those limits? I mean, whether it's AI or traditional identity security, whether you're dealing with human accounts or non-human accounts, What are some of these limits of a traditional IAM program that people may not know about?
Well, why don't we start with what IAM got right? Right?
Okay.
Let's start with that, right? Everyone is now finally on board with authentication maturity, right? Really important, really good. Check that box. Maybe not all, but I would say most, right? I think life cycle automation for employees. I think companies are getting that right now, right? Even standardization, right? People generally understand they want to stop the bleeding and they know what good looks like from the get-go. So I think that's a big check, right? Now here's where I think IAM needs to evolve. Definitely going wider and deeper, and not just understanding the humans and the accounts that are out there, but the entitlement level visibility, right? Not just that it exists, but what can it do, whatever that it is. I think also it needs to evolve is removing more blind spots, right? I think it's a crawl, walk, run for many, but we have to get further along faster. And also, I think what needs to evolve is there's no 100%, but how close can you get, right? And it's almost like IAM solved the front door, if we're going back to my house analogy, but most breaches in 2025 happened in the hallways, right? So that's important. And I think it's not necessarily like a clear goal per se, but I think everyone knows they have to go further into that hallway and they have to open up the door on the left and they have to check the window on the right. And that's what I think needs to happen in 2026.
Yeah, and when we talk about, and it's good that you started with the positive, right? Because all we keep hearing about, it seems like, is the negative and what doesn't work, right? And yeah, I mean, I think that there has been a lot of positive, even just what we started the conversation with, the idea that identity security has come to the forefront. But kind of harping on the negative, because I guess maybe I'm just a negative guy. Tell us about some of the additional blind spots that customers tend to have when it comes to access, when it comes to identities, when it comes to essentially protecting the house. What are some additional gaps that we as an industry need to think about, and people listening to this need to think about their own organizations? So, I said what one thing folks got right is kind of the life cycle for employees, for humans, right? Makes sense. R. Gurevich, generally people know what that is. But Rosie, you can keep me honest here. How many times do we see the R. Gurevich primary account in like the local admin group across just an obnoxious amount of servers? Right.
A lot. Often.
Well, not that account. Our IT is top notch. As an example, yes, we see that a lot.
We see that a lot, right? So again, it's appreciating that you have to take it a few steps further. And by the way, the few steps further of 2026 will be table stakes. And then it's a few more steps further past that, right? So I honestly believe that the world is going in the right direction, no doubt about it. But the truth is, it's a moving target.
So does it still come down to visibility, discovery? Is that still, it's now 2026, that's still the main issue, or at least the first issue?
Well, I would say look at what Gartner just released when we were at the show. They created a whole new kind of market category for identity visibility, right? That's not just because somebody felt like it. They reacted to what they're seeing in the market, what companies are asking them to learn more about, the real pain that's being had, across the globe, right? So 100%. But I think something that we hold near and dear at Sphere is visibility absolutely is step one. You have to know what you have. You can't protect what you don't know exists. But what good is knowing you have an issue if you can't actually fix it? And there's a lot out there that want to kind of call victory by having a better understanding today than they did yesterday of where their risks are. But if that risk is exposed and there is a security incident because of that risk, it's not good enough to just know it existed, right? It's about also fixing the problems. And I think in the past, people were also scared to do that kind of discovery because then they have a fiduciary responsibility to fix it, and they just simply didn't know how, right? So I would say visibility, 100%, such a core theme. But we like to talk about the remediation side of it almost with equal footing, because again, what good is a list of problems if you can't start crossing them off the list?
Yeah, and of course, to get to remediation, you mentioned Gartner. I know you had a talk at Gartner centered around ownership, right? And I think you and I take the visibility remediation or discovery remediation discussion for granted, that in the middle of that, the only way you could get to remediation is ownership. So I'm not going to ask you to redo your whole speech around ownership, but can you give our audience a little bit of understanding of what is ownership and just why is this so pivotal for you to be able to go from, ultimately you go to risk reduction, right? You discover and remediate to reduce risk. But ownership is the one key, right, that's usually missing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, and it kind of can tie interestingly back to the AI conversation, right? A lot of folks have this grandiose kind of idea that AI will solve all of IAM forever. But the truth is you still need that human in the loop, right? No one will go to a board member and say, sorry, that system went down. Our AI thought it was okay. That's I need to fix my resume kind of issue, right? Mm-hmm. So having a human in the middle that can participate in the certification loop, the remediation loop, I don't think that's going away. If anything, I think it's even more pressing because people want to put their foot on the gas of fixing problems. You used to kind of get around all of that human interaction and all the kind of game of telephone that people used to have to play when it came time to remediate by just doing small bits at a time. But now you have to get a lot done quickly, and you can't break everything along the way. You can't take down your company because you want to enable good identity security. There's tons of dialogues I've had this year about that friction across the folks that want to fix the problems and the business that needs to run the company. And a little friction is okay, but creating mass outage and breaking a business critical system, that's still the no-fly zone, no matter how fast you want to improve your identity security. So having that human that knows a lot more than the Good Samaritan at the help desk is absolutely pivotal to go from, I know that this is a problem, to I fix this problem. I could talk about ownership for ages, Rosie. We may need to do a separate podcast just on that.
I think we did do one years ago. Now I could actually say years ago. We've been on for that long. Wow. Yeah, and I think ownership is the kind of thing that people take for granted, but it is, as well as I know, it is number one of the hardest things to do. And number two, it's the thing that resonated with people, I think, at that Gartner show, right? How many people came up to the booth and said, wow, this was like real for me, right? Your talk was a real solid problem. It wasn't kind of up in the clouds of kind of theory. It was a real problem that I know I'm dealing with every day. And you gave me some real solutions for how to deal with that. And I think that resonates with people because, again, no one's just going to push the button and fix a million things without having the responsible person tell you it's okay to do this.
I also think, just one more quick thought, if you don't mind, Rosie, on that topic.
Absolutely.
I think, back in the day, even help desk folks, if they got hounded enough by somebody senior enough to give them access to something they need to get done, they would do it. Now they're trained, educated, even folks look under the hood to confirm, did you get the right person to approve this addition, this change, right? So they're being tasked with making sure they get the right approval. So oftentimes the answer to the executive or the senior person that asks, how are you going to get me access? They go, I don't know. I'm not sure. So the cool part about that little anecdote is that there are operational efficiencies that you gain by doing this right? And by being proactive about it. It's not just about preventing, an outage when you make a change. It's also about getting people what they need faster without introducing a vulnerability into your system.
So if you had to think about 2025 and obviously identity security and what we do, can you think of something, this might take us back to AI, but can you think of a trend in identity that was overhyped over the last year?
Yeah, let's go back to AI, right? So I think overhyped, definitely the concept that there could be fully autonomous identity decisions, right? I think it sounds real snazzy on paper. I'm sure marketing people absolutely loved playing with that. And there's a billion infographics and memes and all sorts of fun stuff out there and serious stuff out there too, right? But more and more, I see folks wanting to take a more practical, honest approach. And going back to that concept of like humans in the middle or humans and AI as part of the tagline. And even companies that come to us because they are specialists in, using AI for improved engineering or using AI for improved marketing or whatever it might be, more and more of them are starting to advertise it as a human in the middle. So I think the same holds for identity, right? The concept of fully autonomous decisions that are made by AI, I think is a dream. It's a fun conversation, maybe, pretty neat at your lunch and learn or at an internal enablement conversation. But in practice, I think people recognize we're not there yet. And by the way, we may never be there yet. But that doesn't mean that AI is bad or not good or not helpful. Oh, quite the contrary. It takes what a human can do and amplifies it, but without introducing more risk. So that's my one answer. But can I do another answer, Rosie?
Absolutely.
I have a thing about twos today.
And usually you like threes. So if you want to do two more, by all means.
I'm in a duo mode. So the other hype that I think, or overhype that I think happened this year is the concept that one tool to rule them all, like the platform play, right? I think that was overhyped as well. And again, going back to Gartner, the fact that they introduced that whole IVIP category, identity, visibility, and intelligence platforms, it should come to us that purpose-built is good. Mm-hmm. Jack of all trades, not always great. Maybe good, but not always great, right? So I think the fact that there is categories and conversations that are about specificity and going deep into a very, very targeted area, that's really important. And I think it helps to educate the end users, the companies, the customers that are out there, that you can't solve everything in one technology. That's just the truth. Right? And yes, there's a lot of M&A activity and huge companies are trying to do more with their platforms, but there's a reason they couldn't do it with their platform to begin with, right? So right. I think that the whole platformization was a big hype, but I do believe that more and more large organizations are going to want to be able to do more, and they're probably going to do it through acquisition.
Yeah, it definitely seems to be the trend towards probably the second half of the year and going into next year. It doesn't seem like it's slowing down. So we talked about the trends that were overhyped. Anything that was underappreciated in 2025?
Well, definitely two again. I have two things I wanted to say. Look at that. I don't know. Today's an upside down day.
Maybe you should try for three. Today,
no, I know why it's the day of twos is because today's the 22nd.
Oh, all right. So there we go.
There you go.
That must be it.
And I'll go back to the Gartner conversation. We're just back from Gartner. It's still on my mind, right? You mentioned Sins of the Past. That was at our booth on the backdrop. I believe that's still underappreciated this year. Although, like you said, it was just heartwarming to hear so many companies come up to us and thank us for talking about that. That's a pain of today that they're struggling with. And also, I didn't have a magic 8 ball going into Gartner when we decided that we were going to do our presentation about ownership. But also folks said to me, that's underappreciated, the importance of ownership and what you should do next. And one of my call to actions in that presentation was, I would like everyone to treat ownership as a foundational control, not as an afterthought, not as a tactical capability, but as a fundamental control. Put it on your dashboards next to every other KPI and KRI you're tracking, right? List it as something that you're aiming towards, that you're measuring, that you're quantifying. You'll be shocked at how much more you can fix when those numbers are trending up. So I guess Gartner is also on my mind because those two were just huge for us when we were talking to real people solving real problems.
Yeah, ownership as a control is interesting. I always tell people, if I told someone you have a critical service account and the password hasn't changed in 20 years and it's 3 characters, it would be like, stop everything, we got to fix it. But then you ask them, how are you doing with account ownership? I'm like, our CMDB's a mess. Or how are you doing with server? CMDB's a mess. Well, why aren't you alarmed, right? Without that, if you did have that scenario where you did have that service account with the simple password and you need to fix it, you have no hope of fixing it unless you figure out who owns the application for that service account or who actually owns that individual account. It should be just as critical for you that you don't have that individual, that person, right, that understands and can, more importantly, give you approval to make the change that you want to make. So if we could kind of look forward a little bit, right, thinking about 2026. So can you tell us a little bit about what you think some of the boards and executives in organizations, how they played a role in shaping priorities for identity in 2025? And then, because we're going to have to do 2 things in this recording, tell us about what you think they should be doing in 2026, what boards and executives should be asking of their CISO and their security people going into 2026 as it relates to identity.
So a little inside baseball, right? When we meet companies and we believe that they have an interest in who we are and what we do, and sometimes that leads to demos and evals and all of those techie things that companies like us do, we ask our teams to fill something out called a business value assessment. And the reason we do that is because we recognize that companies don't invest in solutions like ours because they feel like it, because they like you, because they think were really, awesome to talk to that one time they met you at a show, right? They do it because there's some inherent value of bringing you to their organization. So we ask a lot more questions to the people we meet about why. Why are you doing this? Why is this important? Why now? And the amount of times this year that we heard board mandate as an answer to that question was striking. It used to be a security requirement. It used to be an infrastructure team that got stuck holding the bag on all the problems on their servers, right? But it's moved up a number of levels within an organization in terms of why are we doing this, who cares about this, and why do they care about it? And I think because of that, it has an interesting kind of domino effect across the industry, but even within the companies themselves. So that's a definite observed shift that I've experienced. You never really heard boards talk about this level of detail in terms of what they care about and why. So I think that's something that I've really felt and experienced myself. Something else that's interesting too is I'm seeing boards more and more tie identity into resilience and business continuity. It used to be, back in our pre-Sphere days, Rosie, you and I remember this, in our Lehman Brothers days, it used to be about physical location of people. Where can they go to park and walk in a door and sit at a desk, right? What happens when there's a storm or an unfortunate physical calamity, right? And now identity is also tied to cyber threats. It's tied to businesses staying online and being able to operate, right? Companies being able to leverage their systems and applications. So that's pivotal in everything that we do. But I will say there still feels like there's a gap between, I'll call it like cyber risk language and identity reality. And it's still better than it was a year ago, where folks understand the importance or at least trust that there is an importance to it. But there's still a long ways to go to really get boards to appreciate and fully understand the wonderful world of identity. So I think it's definitely moving in the right direction, but there's still plenty to do when it comes to educating executives and educating boards. And the truth is, the folks that are dealing with these challenges, they have to convince the folks all the way up at the top about why they need to think about this, why they need to spend money on this, why they need to hire for this. And I think it's just going to take more time and, unfortunately, more of their peers experiencing issues.
And you think going into 2026, that trend, what you saw in 2025, is just going to continue on and to a greater extent, potentially?
Well, my gut tells me that grandma's going to understand multi-factor authentication soon.
Sounds like grandma is vying for a board seat.
Maybe.
Could be. And she's telling about competitors. Next thing you know, she's going to do a competitive analysis and, tell you maybe you should invest in this technology. You never know.
Never know.
So, Rita, we've reached a part of the podcast. As you know, we do a lot of serious questions, and then we do some, one last not serious question. And we've done that since the beginning of the podcast. Like I said, this is now the second year, the end of the second year. I'm actually going to break the rule. I am going to not ask you a fun question. I know you were looking forward to it, but
I was.
It's kind of a fun question, but not really. It's still work related. I don't know if I ever told you this, but about a year ago, I did a career fair at my son's school. So I set up kind of like a booth, right? I had a bunch of swag set up, and the kids, and I mean it was pretty big. There was like maybe 30 different companies, right? That mostly parents, and I set up the booth, and I'm standing there. And the kids are coming over with their notepad, and they're looking down, and some teacher told them all the questions they had to ask, and they're kind of asking the questions, but they're kind of just working through what someone told them they had to do, right? Probably not really listening to my answers and just kind of writing it down because someone told them to do that. So 10, 15 kids do this. Finally, this group of young women come over, and I'm doing the same thing, and the same thing's happening, and they're looking down and writing it. And then I happen to mention, and our company was, our CEO and our founder is a woman. And they look up. And I'm like, really? And they start asking me, they're asking me questions, and not the questions that they had written down. And I'm describing, and I'm saying how you were young, and you started the company, and you had a vision, and it's a software company. And they're like really, really engaged. Now, for our viewers, our listeners, if you don't know Rita, she's one of the most humblest person. She will be the first one that will pick up a broom if, something needs to be swept. So, Rita is not the type of person that you probably don't recognize that you are a role model especially for women who are in this still male-dominated industry. But you are. right? And I saw it firsthand because then I started doing that with everyone. And it wasn't just the girls that were coming up. I would say that to the young boys, and even they were much, much more engaged. So I have a question, and this is a really long way of asking you this question. But before you started Sphere, right? I know you and I spoke before you started Sphere, but before you started Sphere, what I want to know is, was there anything that you were scared of, something that was a fear that turned out to be completely irrational once you actually started doing it, going 1, 2, 3 years into it? Was there anything that you were worried about that turned out to be no big deal? And then was there anything that you thought was not going to be a big deal, but turned out to be something that it was more difficult than you thought it would be?
It's a great question. So I would say one of my biggest concerns when I started Sphere was not just gender, but also age, right? I was 25 when I started the company. And, I got my career start in a large bank. So you always go to your friends first, right? When you're pitching what you want to do as a company. And I went to all these big banks and I would sit in these offices and glass walls and fancy, trinkets lining their shelves. And I said, how the heck are these people going to hire me to help them with anything, right? Some of them had more experience than how long I've been alive. And at the time, it was a consulting company that I started, team of one, right? How the heck am I going to get these people to entrust in me? And that's when I learned that every problem has a solution. So I said, I can't, fib my way through this. They can tell I'm not their age, right? They can go and look on LinkedIn. That's when LinkedIn became just huge. They could see my work history. I can't, exaggerate my way around that. But what I learned is, how else can I de-risk this for that person in that glass office? And I said, okay, they're all scared of spending money and then wasting money. I realized that real quick. So I said, okay, I'm going to offer to do this project for these people without getting paid. And I'm going to let them decide at the end of the project if I did a worthwhile job. And if I don't, we will leave as friends, and no harm, no foul for them. But if they did, not only will they pay the bill, but they probably ask me to do something else. And never had somebody walk away, right? So again, it was a fear, a concern, an anxiety that I had. But again, every problem has a solution. And I always say, explore, be creative, try new things. I did try other things before that approach that did not work. But when I landed on that, and it worked a bunch of times, I started to create customers, and that created credibility. Then they started referring me to their other friends at other companies, and I didn't have to do that anymore. So I would say that's something that really kind of taught me that try different things, find solutions to problems. They exist out there. Your second question was more around the inverse of that, right? Mm-hmm. Did I think something was no big deal and then became a really big deal? Well, for 10 years, I ran a consulting company. And I said to myself, I'm building this code, right? And Rosie, you were here at that time. We saw ourselves kind of automating how we were doing these projects, and those little bits and bytes of code eventually became utilities and toolkits. And, right before that year 10 mark, I said, I'm going to just turn this into a software company. What I realized very quickly in that first year is running a software company is very different than running a consulting business. And I put my tail between my legs and I said, you know what? I'm going to go get outside help. I did a lot on my own for the 10 years leading up to that, but I need some help. And I ended up, going to the venture capital community, doing my Series A. But if you asked me, any time in that first decade, if I'd ever go down that route, I would probably say, I don't even know how to spell venture capital. So that was interesting, evolution for me as a person, as a CEO, as a founder. But man, did I get a crash course. And lo and behold, a number of years later, we did our Series B, and there's a lot in store for us next year as well. So yeah, that was something I underestimated, but had to learn quick on the job training, and boy, am I glad I did.
And we're here to tell the story.
We're here.
So Rita, I lied. I do have a fun question.
Okay, thank you.
So I can't possibly not have a fun question. Okay, if you know, like Charlie Brown, the Peanuts, if you had to pick one character, if you had to be one character on in Charlie Brown, which character would you be, and why?
This is how every viewer will know that these questions are not shared ahead of time, because Rosie would know I've never actually watched Charlie Brown. That being said,
okay.
I want to answer your
but
question.
do you know like, some of the characters, like some of the attributes of the characters?
I don't, but I love dogs. I'm an animal lover. So I'm going to go Snoopy? Is that his name?
Snoopy.
I'm going to go with Snoopy, and I hope that's not a bad answer, and I hope that he's not a silly character, but I always go for the animals over the humans.
No, Snoopy is like super cool. Like my answer would be I want to be Snoopy, but I'm probably Charlie Brown.
Why is that, Rosie?
Well, Charlie Brown is kind of like, a little mopey, and, bad things happen to them.
Aww.
So,
isn't that Eeyore, or is that a different?
No, that's oh my God.
Oh, Winnie the Pooh.
That's Winnie the Pooh. Yeah.
Oh,
do you know Winnie the Pooh? Do you want to pick a Winnie the Pooh character?
Man, my parents were strict. I didn't watch any of this stuff growing up.
Wow. Well, you know what? We'll stick with Charlie Brown.
Okay.
And we'll stick with Snoopy.
Snoopy.
As long as we got the fun question, and I'd be amiss, to remiss to not do that last question. So Rita, this has been fantastic. I always tell my guests you could come back at any time, and of course you could come back anytime. But I like to keep the special ones. I like to have you on for the special ones. And in fact, I won't give it away, but we are doing a very special episode in January, kind of a broader one looking ahead, where we're going to have many guests on, and of course you'll be on as well. I haven't told you yet, but it's one where kind of a panel style. Let's get a whole lot of people talking about trends for 2026 and beyond, and what to look for. So stay tuned for our viewers. You will absolutely will not want to miss that one. Other than that, Rita, thank you so much. Happy New Year to everyone listening, and looking forward to another great year of podcasting next year.
Rosie, you killed it with your Smells Like Identity Hygiene podcast over the last 2 years, I can say now.
2 years. Thanks, Rita.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Smells Like Identity Hygiene. Smells Like Identity Hygiene is a production of Sphere Technology Solutions, and our producer is Matthew Plank. Until next time.